He fired me next to the high-end espresso machine. I remember the smell of burnt coffee beans in the air as Caleb, the founder's nephew and the newly appointed director of operations, stopped me in the middle of the hallway. He didn't call me into his office. He wanted an audience. "Elara, got a minute?" he said, using that tone he'd picked up from some weekend leadership seminar, the one meant to convey authority. I had been with Momentum Dynamics for 6 years. I wasn't just an employee, I was the architect. I built the core, the media optimization algorithm that was, quite literally, the soul of our company. All our revenue, all our major clients, everything ran on the code I'd written during late nights fueled by cold brew and an almost blind faith in the project. But none of that mattered to Caleb. His uncle, Mr. Sterling, built the company on innovation and grit. Caleb inherited the last name and figured that gave him the right to play God with our futures. "We're restructuring the tech division," he announced, loud enough for the entire design team to hear. "Your role has become redundant. We're pivoting to a more agile, streamlined approach." Redundant. The word hung in the air. My work was the engine in the car he was trying to drive without even knowing where the gas pedal was. I wanted to scream, to list every contract my code had secured, every award we'd won because of my innovation. But instead, an icy calm washed over me. I looked at him, a small, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips, a smile that completely disarmed him. "Understood, Caleb. Best of luck with the new approach." I turned and walked back to my desk, feeling the stares of pity and shock from my colleagues. They knew. Everyone there, except for him, knew the disaster that was coming. I was the only person in the world who understood the complexities of the core, and he had just ripped it out of the company's chest. The night was a blur of dark screens and silence. 6 years of dedication, of late nights where my monitor and I were the only witnesses to the sunrise, reduced to a single word: redundant. The public humiliation stung, but it was the confusion that ate away at me. Why? It made no logical sense. We were about to execute the server migration for North Star Bank, our largest client. It was a high-stakes operation scheduled for the following Saturday, a project I had been planning for months. Every command line, every security protocol, it was all in my head. Had he even glanced at the schedule? The ring of my personal cell phone the next morning sounded like a fire alarm, a number I knew as well as my own signature. Mr. Sterling, the founder, the man who interviewed me 6 years ago and saw more in me than just a coder. "Elara, for God's sake, what happened? I just got back from a trip and was told you'd cleared out your desk." His voice was a mix of panic and disbelief. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Your nephew let me go, Mr. Sterling. He said my work was redundant." Silence. A heavy, loaded silence, charged with restrained fury. I heard the sound of paper being crumpled on the other end of the line. "What?" "Elara," his voice dropped, growing more serious, almost a whisper. "The North Star Bank migration. Does he know about the Keystone Protocol?" My blood ran cold. The Keystone Protocol. It wasn't a clause in a contract. It was something much deeper, far more powerful. It was a proprietary security handshake I designed myself with Mr. Sterling's blessing after an industrial espionage attempt years ago. It was a unique cryptographic key stored on a physical hardware token that only I possessed, required to authorize any changes to the core programming of the core. Without it, the algorithm went into total lockdown. It became an unbreachable black box. "No," I replied, and for the first time in 24 hours, the knot in my throat loosened. "My God," he muttered. "He can't do the migration without you, Elara. The entire system will freeze. The bank's data will become inaccessible. It will be a catastrophic failure." A slow, sharp realization began to settle in. His arrogance had blinded him. He had no idea what he'd done. And in that exact moment, the sting of betrayal gave way to a new, dangerous feeling. Control. Caleb hadn't just fired me. He had just handed me the detonator. The tables have completely turned for Elara. If you, like me, can't wait to see what happens next, take a quick moment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the outcome of this story and others like it. The show began at 10:13 a.m. I was in my living room, a fresh cup of coffee in hand, when the monitoring dashboard for The Core, which I kept mirrored on my personal tablet, began to flash red. It was a light show that only I could understand, a cascade of authentication failures, processing spikes on CPUs that should have been idle. They were trying to force their way in. They were poking the bear without knowing where the cage was. I didn't have to wait long. First, a LinkedIn notification. One of the junior programmers, a talented kid I had mentored myself. The message was short and desperate. Elara, for the love of God, the staging server is locked. No one can roll it back. Caleb is losing his mind. I ignored it. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. An email from HR. Subject, urgent, clarification on offboarding process. The formality was so transparent, it was almost comical. I ignored it. Then the coordinated attack began. Text messages from numbers I didn't have saved but knew were from colleagues, calls from an Austin area code, the company's main line. I just watched my phone screen light up, each notification a small wave of panic originating from the building I used to call my second home. Finally, at 10:52 a.m., the message I'd been waiting for, a direct email from Caleb. Elara, I believe there was a misunderstanding in our conversation yesterday. Your transition was not properly planned. We need you to come into the office today for an urgent technical alignment. Your presence is indispensable. Indispensable. The same word that, 24 hours earlier, had been replaced by redundant. He didn't apologize. He didn't admit his mistake. He just changed my status based on how high the water was rising around his neck. I took a sip of my now cold coffee. The urgency was his, not mine. The definitive confirmation of the disaster didn't come from a corporate email, but from a call with the hiss of an espresso machine in the background. It was Maya, the head of the design team, a friend who, like me, had been with the company from the early days. Elara, you are not going to believe the scene that just unfolded here, she said, her voice low, almost a conspiratorial whisper. Try me, I replied, trying to sound bored. She said, the migration meeting, Mr. Sterling came downstairs. He walked into the war room right in the middle of Caleb's presentation to the tech team. He didn't say a word. He just took the flash drive his nephew was holding and plugged it into the projector. I held my breath. He opened a single file, a black screen with lines of code nobody understood, and he asked one single question, looking directly at Caleb. Do you know what the Keystone Protocol is? A slow smile spread across my face. And what did he say? He stammered, said it was some legacy protocol, something that was going to be phased out in his new agile architecture. He tried to bullshit his way through it, talking about cloud native and microservices. But Mr. Sterling cut him off. He looked at the entire room and said, this legacy, as he calls it, is what prevents anyone, including us, from accessing our client's data without authorization from the one person who holds the key. And he fired her yesterday. There was a pause. I could feel the tension on the other end of the line. Elara, his face, he went white. Ghost white. He realized in front of everyone that his little power play yesterday had just cost the company its biggest contract in history. And what did Mr. Sterling do?
He looked at Caleb and said in the coldest voice I've ever heard, if North Star Bank terminates their contract over a security breach, your new approach will start in the unemployment line. I let out a breath I didn't even know I was holding. There it was, the crack in his armor of arrogance. Maya, thanks for calling. Of course, I just don't know what you're going to do, she added. But whatever it is, just know that you're holding all the cards. At 11:30 a.m., a direct email from Mr. Sterling landed in my inbox. The subject was simple, a conversation. The body of the message was a mixture of an appeal and a corporate apology. He was deeply sorry for the incident, stated my contributions were invaluable, and asked if I would please come in so we could find a solution. It was tempting. The part of me that had built this company from scratch wanted to rush in and put out the fire. But the part of me that had been humiliated in the hallway, in front of everyone, knew that rushing back would be a mistake. Their mistake wasn't just technical. It was about respect, about value. Years of loyalty couldn't be bought back by a hurried email. I opened my laptop, and with the calm of someone placing pieces on the chessboard, I wrote my reply. Not a phone call, an email. Cold, professional, surgical. Dear Mr. Sterling, thank you for your message. I am willing to collaborate to ensure system stability and the success of the North Star Bank migration. However, my return is contingent on new conditions. I propose a new role, Director of Innovation and Systems Security, with full autonomy over the core algorithm and all of its associated protocols. This autonomy must be formalized in a contract specifying non-interference from the current Director of Operations. Additionally, I require a formal apology from Caleb to be communicated to the tech team, clarifying that the decision to terminate my employment was a strategic miscalculation. I hit send. The silence that followed was my answer. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. It was him. Your terms are acceptable, Elara. Please come to the office now. I arrived at Momentum Dynamics shortly after 2 p.m. I didn't use the employee entrance. I walked through the main lobby carrying myself like an important client. The receptionist, who had watched me leave with my head down the day before, shot up from her chair. Miss Hale, Mr. Sterling is expecting you. The hallways felt different. Conversation stopped. Keyboards fell silent. These weren't stares of pity anymore. They were stares of awe, of respect, maybe even of fear. The atmosphere was charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Mr. Sterling was waiting for me at his office door. There was no smile, just the weary face of a man who saw his legacy at risk. Elara, thank you for coming. I nodded, saying nothing, and walked in. He closed the door behind me. I made a mistake, he began without preamble. I gave him too much power too fast. I wanted him to learn by doing, but I never imagined he'd tear the house down to prove he could swing a hammer. What he did to you was an outrage, a lack of respect that has stained our culture. I remained silent, letting the weight of his words fill the room. He sighed. I read your email. The new contract is being drafted by legal, as we speak. Full autonomy. The position is yours. And the apology? I asked, my voice firm. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. This is about dignity, isn't it? It's about the truth, I corrected. It's about making it clear to the team that competence cannot be dismissed as redundant on a manager's whim. A long silence. Then he nodded slowly. You have my word. He will do it. As I stood and left his office, I saw Caleb at the end of the hall, pretending to be on a phone call. Our eyes locked for a moment. The arrogance in his gaze was gone. In its place was fury, humiliation, and for the first time, the unmistakable glint of fear. The fear of someone who has just realized the game has changed and he no longer makes the rules.
Elara didn't just come back. She came back on top, setting the rules. Stories of strong women taking back control are the heart of our channel. If you support that strength, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a second of the justice that's coming. The North Star Bank migration took place on Saturday, in the dead of night, just as planned. The war room was tense. Caleb was there, in a corner, silent and sullen by his uncle's express order. He was a mere shadow, watching as I took command. With my personal laptop and the Keystone Protocol hardware token connected, I initiated the authorization sequence. The core algorithm responded to my commands instantly, like a loyal dog recognizing its owner. In 2 hours, the operation that had paralyzed the company for 2 days was completed without a single error. The bank's CTO, a skeptical and rigorous man, had been watching everything via video conference. At the end, he simply said, "Flawless, Elara, as always," and disconnected. In the room, the relief was palpable. Mr. Sterling approached me, gratitude written all over his face. "You saved us, Elara." "I saved my work," I replied, packing up my equipment. The rest was just a consequence. In the following days, the news spread like wildfire. Elara, architect of the core, returns as director of innovation and saves multi-million-dollar contract. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew the truth. I came back to fix the mess the air had made. My new title and the corner office with a view of the Austin skyline were visual symbols of my victory. But I wasn't naive. Caleb might have been silenced, but he hadn't been neutralized. The retaliation began subtly, almost invisibly. First, access to a research server I had requested was accidentally denied. Then a meeting I scheduled with the data analysis team was canceled at the last minute with the excuse of a scheduling conflict with the executive board. The final straw was an email. A performance report on the core, supposedly sent by me to Mr. Sterling, filled with doctored data that suggested an imminent security failure. Luckily, I was in his office when the email arrived. "This is wrong," I said immediately, pointing to the inflated metrics. "I didn't send this." We called in the cybersecurity team. The analysis was quick. The email wasn't an external attack. It had been sent from within our network. More specifically, from the terminal of a marketing intern who swore up and down he was on his lunch break. That's when I knew. Caleb wouldn't dare confront me directly again. Now, the game was different. He wanted to isolate me, to paint me as incompetent, to create a narrative that the new director was overwhelmed and making mistakes. It was corporate sabotage in its most cowardly form, a slow-acting poison meant to undermine my credibility until I either quit in frustration or was removed for just cause. But I wasn't the same, Elara. I wasn't going to disappear. I started documenting everything. Every accident, every misunderstanding. I created my own dossier. A digital paper trail waiting for the right moment to use it. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. The atmosphere at Momentum Dynamics grew heavy. The sense of relief after the successful migration was replaced by a veiled tension. People would greet me in the hallways, but their eyes were cautious. Caleb's poison was spreading. I could feel the whispers, the seeds of doubt being subtly planted. Can she handle it? I heard a critical report was leaked. I didn't request an official investigation. Instead, I did something smarter. I used my new authority as Director of Innovation to launch a security and internal logs optimization project. The pretext was perfect: to strengthen our defenses after the supposed phishing attempt that generated the fake email. No one could question it. In reality, I was building my own trap. I spent sleepless nights not writing code, but analyzing terabytes of access logs, cross-referencing timestamps, VPN logins, and file access records. The pattern began to emerge, clear as day. Small alterations to documents, always made from generic terminals or during lunch breaks, but always minutes after Caleb had walked past those desks. They were digital breadcrumbs, but together, they formed a path leading directly to him. The final piece of the puzzle came from where I least expected it. One of the junior programmers, the same one who had messaged me in desperation, approached me at the coffee bar. He looked pale. "Elara, I need to tell you something," he began nervously. "Last week, Caleb asked me to run a test script on my machine, said it was for a new project of his. I thought it was weird, but he's a director. I ran it." I stared at him, motionless. "What was the script, Leo?" I'm not sure," he admitted, his voice cracking. "But right after, my access to the HR system logs was blocked. And today, I overheard him telling the marketing manager they had proof that you'd been accessing everyone's salaries." My blood boiled. He wasn't just sabotaging me, he was framing me, using a kid as a pawn to plant false evidence that could get me fired for cause, destroying my career forever. "Leo," I said with a calmness I didn't feel,
"Do you have the file for that script?" He nodded, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "I saved it. I got scared." "You did the right thing," I assured him. "Now let me handle the rest." That night, I didn't sleep. I decoded the script. It was a masterpiece of treachery, a program that forged access logs using Leo's credentials, creating a false trail that directly incriminated me. And in the source code, barely obfuscated, was the developer's digital signature, a signature I would recognize anywhere. The same coding pattern Caleb used in his college projects, which he arrogantly still kept in a public online portfolio. He wasn't just a saboteur, he was an amateur. And I had the definitive proof. The trap was set. All that was left was to lure the predator. I didn't schedule a meeting. I summoned an urgent security vulnerability analysis presentation for 9 a.m. the next morning in the main boardroom. On the mandatory attendance list, Mr. Sterling, the entire executive board, the head of HR, the lead counsel, and, of course, Caleb. The title of the summons was technical enough to not arouse suspicion, but the guest list ensured the audience for the final act would be complete. Caleb arrived last with an air of bored superiority, scrolling on his phone. He looked relaxed, confident that his trap for me was about to spring. He only looked up when he saw me standing next to the projector and realized there was no one else from the tech team in the room. His smile faltered. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice echoing in the silent room. "I've called you here to discuss a critical security flaw we've identified, a flaw that isn't in our firewall or our servers, but in our culture." I projected the first image onto the screen. The fake email with the performance report. As you know, this email was sent from within our network. I moved to the next slide, a flowchart showing the coincidences of improper access always occurring near Caleb's physical location. He shifted in his seat, his face beginning to lose its color. "Caleb," I said, turning to face him directly, "you recently alleged in informal conversations that I had been accessing confidential salary data, correct?" He stammered, I heard rumors, concerns about security." How convenient, because the proof of this breach was meant to come from a script run on the computer of Leo, from the programming team, a script he was coerced into running. I projected the script's lines of code onto the screen. A deathly silence fell over the room. This script forges access logs. It is a tool of fraud. And the most interesting part? I clicked. The next slide showed the script's code side by side with a code snippet from Caleb's old college portfolio. I highlighted in red the variables, the functions, the indentation style. They were identical, the same digital signature of a lazy, mediocre programmer. The signature is unmistakable. Only one person in this company codes like this, I said, looking him in the eye. "You didn't just try to sabotage me, Caleb. You used a junior employee to fabricate a crime and tried to destroy my career. You are a fraud." Caleb opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked to his uncle, hoping for a rescue that would not come. Mr. Sterling stood up slowly. His eyes didn't show anger. It was worse. It was cold, absolute disappointment. "Caleb," he said, his voice low but cutting, "get your things. Security will escort you out. You are suspended, pending a board investigation into fraud and coercion. Hand over your badge and your phone, now." Caleb shot me one last look. It wasn't hatred. It was pure disbelief. The disbelief of a cheater who, for the first time in his life, had been caught so completely, so irrefutably, that there was nowhere left to run. He stood up and walked out in silence, leaving behind nothing but the image of his digital signature glowing on the screen, like an epitaph for his short and disastrous career.
Caleb's suspension turned into a termination for cause in less than a week. The board didn't need much deliberation. The evidence was overwhelming. The script, Leo's testimony, the digital trail of sabotage. The official announcement was discreet, an internal memo citing breach of the code of conduct. But the truth, the full story, was already an open secret in the hallways and coffee break conversations. I didn't feel euphoric. There was no triumphant shout. What I felt was a deep calm, the feeling of a weight I had been carrying for months finally being lifted from my shoulders. It was the tranquility of someone who had fought the right battle, the right way, and won. A few days later, Mr. Sterling called me into his office again. The door was closed. The atmosphere, however, was completely different. There was a respect in his eyes that I had never seen before. "Elara," he began, "I've spent the last few days reflecting, not just on Caleb, but on the kind of company I almost allowed momentum to become." He paused. "I failed to protect our culture, and you, even while under attack, reminded me of what truly matters." He pushed a document across the mahogany desk. It wasn't a contract. It was a new company org chart. "The Director of Operations role is vacant, but I'm not going to fill it. I'm restructuring. I'm creating a new position above the director level, reporting directly to me and the board, Vice President of Technology and Strategy." My eyes widened. He continued, "I'm not asking you to fix the code. I'm asking you to help fix the company, to ensure that innovation and integrity are always valued more than a last name or arrogance. The position is yours if you want it." I looked at the paper, at my name at the top of the technical hierarchy. I hadn't asked for this. I had fought for my space, and in the process, I had proven I deserved much more. "I accept," I said, "on one condition. I want to reopen the mentorship program for new talent, which Caleb cut, and I want Leo to be the first promoted within it." A genuine smile, the first I'd seen from him in months, appeared on Mr. Sterling's face. "That's exactly why I'm offering you the job." That night, from my new office window, I looked out at the Austin city lights spreading across the horizon. For years, I believed my value was in the code I wrote in silence. I was humiliated, sabotaged, and underestimated. But silence almost cost me everything. The real turning point wasn't when I saved the contract or exposed the saboteur. It was the moment I stopped accepting disrespect and started to fight back, not with their weapons, but with my own: intelligence, strategy, and the truth.
I learned that being competent isn't arrogance, and that fighting for what's right isn't insubordination. It's leadership. And from that day on, I wouldn't just be the architect of an algorithm. I would be the architect of a new future for this company, a future I would write myself, line by line. Elara's story shows us that sometimes the best revenge isn't to destroy your enemy, but to build a success so great that they become irrelevant. If you were also inspired by her strength, please leave a like so YouTube can share this story with more people. And of course, if you're not yet part of our community, subscribe now so you don't miss any stories. It's amazing how narratives like this can connect people from all over. So we can get an idea of how far our stories are reaching, please comment below what city, state, or country you're watching from right now. We would love to see our community on the map. Take care, and until the next story.